Hey, Chicago, what do you say? No wins for the Cubs today. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer recording with you here in the evening hours of Saturday, July 13th, 2024. And just when you thought the Cardinals were falling off the path toward enlightenment, they sweep the Cubs in a doubleheader. Let's play two, they said. Well, they played two, and the Cardinals won two. Big offensive outburst in game one. Cardinals win big, 11-3. The nightcap was not as easy to come by the W, but the Cardinals were flying their W flags. I don't really think the Cardinals do that. It's more of a Cubs thing. But they didn't get to do it today because the Cubs lost both games as the Cardinals pull to within 3.5 games back of the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League Central. Welcome into the show. And boy, is it a lot more of an upbeat theme for Cardinals fans tuning in than I'm sure they had the other night, Wednesday night, when the Royals took two from the Cardinals in that doubleheader at Busch Stadium. Totally a different vibe now as the Cardinals have reached 50 wins on the season. They are 50-45 with one game to go before the All-Star break mercifully gets here. The Brewers have been struggling. How about former Cardinal Lane Thomas tonight with a catch up against the wall to secure a win for the Washington Nationals to sink the Brewers for their third straight loss? As suddenly, it just seems like the Cardinals have options, folks. NL Central, maybe still an option. Top wildcard spot, maybe still an option. They're 2.5 games back of the Atlanta Braves. That NL wildcard chase is getting a lot more interesting, though, than it was a few weeks ago. With the Mets 4 games above 500, sitting in that third wildcard spot. The Diamondbacks, well, they won again tonight. 4 straight wins for Arizona. Corbin Carroll, couple of home runs for the D-backs. Yeah, they're not going anywhere just yet. The team that made the World Series last year from the NL, we were kind of writing them off. Suddenly, they are right back in the thick of it, just a game back of the Mets for that third wildcard spot. The Padres, Mike Shilt's Padres, they're still in the mix. They won their most recent game. They've got 50 wins as well. They've just played 3 additional games compared to the Cardinals, so they're just a sliver back of both the Mets and the Cardinals in that chase. The Pirates, they're coming on strong. The Reds, they're coming on strong. Both the Reds and Pirates have now won 3 straight games. The Pirates are 1 win away from reaching 500. The Reds are just 2 games below. Suddenly, this is a crowded field in the National League. And even teams like the Nationals, maybe with a couple of wins in a row, they say, hey, don't forget about us. We're only 6 games back. Maybe we've got half the National League still to hop over to get to a wild card spot. But I think the Nationals are still in the mix. The Cubs, well, they're in the mix, but they're 5 games under. The Giants 4 games under. It's a crowded field, but starting to see some teams trying to separate. And I'm telling you what, man, that wild card, that third wild card spot, it might take 85, 86 wins before it's all said and done with the way some of these teams are playing. I mean, it's crazy to see that 6 consecutive spots in the NL standings in terms of the Cardinals, Mets, Diamondbacks, Padres, Pirates, Reds. That's 2 through, whatever that is, 8 in the wild card chase, all with wins, and the majority of those teams riding in on winning streaks at this point. Cardinals just 2 in a row. I'm not sure if we can count that as a streak. Still have that negative 33 run differential, but that doesn't mean squat because the Cardinals are 5 games above 500, and they've been able to right the ship. That's the main point that we'll talk about today as we dive into the couple of wins for the Cardinals as they were able to erase some of the bad feelings from that sweep at the hands of the Royals. And then, obviously, Game 1 against the Cubs on Friday night was an ugly one. Sonny Gray, you feel like that matchup against Kyle Hendricks in a perfect world, in theory, should be a great one for the Cardinals, unless you just kind of dig a little bit into Kyle Hendricks' history against St. Louis, and then you realize, yep, it was just destined to be an L, and it was one. And the Cardinals just found a way almost immediately. I mean, basically immediately. I say almost because they don't bat until the bottom of the first inning of this afternoon's game. But once they started batting, they didn't really stop. For 12 batters in that bottom of the first, Cardinals plated 9 runs. They got some help from the Cubs defense, no doubt, but the Cardinals got off on the right foot for sure in Game 1, and they were able to ride Lance Lynn into the sunset with an 11-3 victory. And then we'll talk as well about Saturday night's game. As the Cardinals win at 5-4, they had to come from behind, as it most certainly was not the Kyle Gibson start the Cardinals were looking for, but to be able to find a way to come back and win that game late, and to do it with the guys that we've been talking about all season not contributing enough. Goldschmidt and Arenado coming through with some clutch hits in the bottom of the 8th inning to propel the Cardinals back into the lead. 5-4, Cardinals win Game 2 as Ryan Helsley picks up his 32nd save of the season. We're just going to break down this doubleheader, probably keep it somewhat brief. I always say that, but you never know. 30 minutes later, 40 minutes later. Keep it somewhat brief because there is a day game on Sunday. But, man, exciting times to be able to just wipe away the stench from what could have been kind of a turning point, a fulcrum point for this Cardinals season. We'll talk about why the Cardinals were able to stem the tide and make sure that did not happen, right? They didn't allow Wednesday to turn into Friday to turn into a full weekend of despair, which would have then been a full week, and then you would have had to linger on that a little bit over the All-Star break. It would have just been bad vibes. The Cardinals at least able to split the series against the Cubs. They'll obviously have a chance on Sunday afternoon to go for the series win, with Miles Michaelis taking on Jameson Taillon of the Cubs at 1:15 Central Time, Busch Stadium, Bally Sports Midwest, KMOX Radio. See, I gave you the full rundown and the full scoop. Appreciate you guys for being with me here. Just want to quickly plug and ask if you're a Cardinals fan and you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet or my Spotify b-schaeff daily feed yet. I would appreciate you doing so. It's a free thing to do, and you'll be up to date on all of our posts, which is basically it's daily. b-schaeff daily for a reason, because we're posting Cardinals content each and every day. And now we're going to start to branch out into TikTok. I'm at b-schaefer12 anywhere you want to find me, but I just started using StreamYard for my podcast with Josh Jacobs, and I'm maybe going to do some b-schaeff daily from StreamYard, put some TikToks out there, put some YouTube shorts out there so that more people can find out, hey, this guy does Cardinals content, and he does it every day. Maybe if I'm a Cardinals fan, I should give it a try. If that's your jam, hit that subscribe button, hit like on this video, and then consider, too, going the extra mile. You can join the Discord. It's free to do so. If you'd like to become a channel member on YouTube, it's not as free to do so, but very worthwhile, as over 30 people have already done it. And, well, they leave rave reviews about how much fun we're having. And if you want to join the b-schaeff Daily Lounge tier of the YouTube channel membership, well, then you get to join the lounge on Discord as well, the private group chat. We're having a lot of fun over there on Discord. All the links of all the crap that I just talked about are in the description to this video. Scroll down to the description, enlarge, expand, and pick the link that's right for you. But we'll have some fun here on the show talking about 2 Cardinals victories. So thank you guys for being along for the ride with me. Before we get into the game, or the games, plural, I should say, I want to start with something that I don't really know if this is what we'll call it, but on some of these Cardinals games that I cover, especially on the weekend, I'm able to go and be part of the manager chat, basically, with the assembled baseball writers in St. Louis that happens in Oli Marmol's office pregame. And those conversations are some of the best, where you learn the most about what's really going on. And it's a shame that I do my afternoon radio show, not because I don't enjoy it. Andy, myself, the big show on KTGR, 4 to 6 p.m. You can download the KTGR app to listen to that. We talk a lot of Cardinals, but also some Mizzou, some Chiefs. It's a fun show. Good time from 4 to 6. But what that means is I'm not able to really do the pre-games during the week because the games are at 6:45. The pregame is, 3:15, whatever it is, 3:30. And I am at my desk in O'Fallon at 4 o'clock to do my radio show. So it's just not something that I'm able to do. But on the weekend, sometimes I am able to get out there, and I did that today. And so what I'm trying to say is, when that's the case, I might like to do a little bit of a segment we call the Reporter's Notebook or something to that effect, where I just bring up some of the stuff that was mentioned with the Cardinals manager that otherwise you may not know is going on or you may not think about as much. Sometimes I just think it's interesting conversation. It's baseball conversation. It doesn't always have to be, I know people say, you need to hold this guy accountable. You need to hold this team accountable. Like, the questions that are asked are to gain a better understanding of what's going on. And today, a lot of the conversation revolved around the bullpen and the way certain roles are developed. And this will never be something that I can play audio from because as a function of what this is, when you go into Ollie's office with the baseball writers, that's not something where anybody's going to take audio from that and then blast it out. That's used for written word only, but we can certainly talk about some of the things that we learned from the chat with Oli Marmol. I just want to explain why you're not going to hear Oli Marmol's voice, because that's not a function of the way that works. But he talked a lot about and was asked a lot about the bullpen and how some of these roles have developed and how it's been the luxury of having guys like Jojo Romero, like Andrew Kittredge. Jojo was here last year, but really stepped into more of a role where he was taking ownership of what it meant to be one of the dudes for this Cardinals bullpen. And I think that, and Ollie mentioned it today, really came into the picture last year when Helsley was injured for a while. And Jojo, it wasn't a winning team last year, but even non-winning teams are going to win some games. And when you do, you got to have somebody to throw the last 3 outs. And Jojo Romero assimilated into that closer role for a while last year, and it's kind of where I think he made his name and he kind of established his presence with this Cardinals team, and that's something that's carried over into his performance this year. Even though he's not the closer this year, he's one of the setup men. They've got a very good setup, and all he said today, look, this was done very well by our front office in the offseason. To get Kittredge, to understand that JoJo is going to be his 8th inning complement, essentially, where those are your setup guys. One from the left side, one from the right side, allows you to play matchups. And it also bumps everybody back a little bit to where they don't need Ryan Helsley to get 5-out saves anymore like they did last year. They don't need Ryan Helsley to come into the 8th and say, hey, can you throw 2 innings today? And then maybe can you throw again tomorrow in the 9th? Where his role was not as clearly defined. And Ollie talked about certain relievers. You have to, and this is one of the things that I think is so hard to have the general public understand, because Ollie is not necessarily going to put the big neon sign up and say all of the little intricate details about the personalities of his relievers and who basically is just willing to do whatever is asked of him, and that's just his personality. It's not a knock on another guy to say that another guy prefers more of a defined role. That's just different strokes for different folks, and I think in a clubhouse of 26, you're always going to have some of that. And managing personalities is probably one of the biggest challenges that an MLB manager actually has. It's the stuff you do see, putting lineups together, making pitching decisions. That's all part of the job, for sure. Managing the personalities within that clubhouse is the part that you don't see as much of because it happens behind the scenes, but is as integral to anything else that an MLB manager does. And I think it's really interesting that Ollie talked about, look, there's a bullpen that we have this year of guys like JoJo and like Kittredge and like a Keenan Middleton, who Cardinals didn't get to see him this year. We'll see if the Cardinals pick up his option for next year. I think it's $6 million, but really it's only $5 million because I think he gets a $1 million buyout if they don't pick up the option. I think if the progression from the procedure that Keenan Middleton had to undergo, if it goes well, I think the Cardinals could pick up that $5 million option. And as we were kind of talking about in the press box before the game, they've spent $5 million a lot worse over the course of time than maybe taking a flyer on Keenan Middleton for next year. Ollie absolutely raved about the guy and what he is as a clubhouse presence, and the fact that, just earlier in the week he popped into Ollie's office to talk and kind of shoot the breeze about some different topics related to baseball and maybe not related to baseball, but just the type of guy and the presence that he is to have around. You could just tell in the tenor of Oli Marmol's voice talking today that he really believes, and I believe this as well, but he really believes that if the Cardinals had Keenan Middleton healthy for this bullpen like they had planned to, for as good as this bullpen is right now, it would have been fun to see how they would have been able to utilize Keenan in that role and the role that they had planned for him as another, I'm not going to say he would have been a wipeout right-hander because we don't know what the performance would have been, but I think we have a decent idea. He's got the ability to miss some bats. He has got a good changeup. He's got different things that he would have brought to the plate, or to the table rather, and thrown to the plate as a pitcher on the mound, that I think would have been really interesting for this Cardinals team. And you could just tell that Oli Marmol felt the same way. But in a way, they've been able to see the rise of Ryan Fernandez this year, which is not to say that it was wholly unexpected. Like, they claimed him in Rule 5 because they thought he could be a good player for them. But he is basically assimilated into the role that they kind of would have envisioned for Keenan Middleton. And so while you're able to kind of push everybody back into roles of comfort where now Ryan Helsley can be the ninth inning guy, and you've got a couple of options for setup, you need more than that. A good bullpen to be able to do what it needs to do needs more than that. And Fernandez is kind of assimilated into that role where he's the next guy in the pecking order and really one of the 4 relievers that, in a perfect world, your starter goes 6 or 7. Those 4 are charged with pitching the 7th, 8th, 9th when you've got a lead in a game. When you're down in a game, that's where the rest of the bullpen comes in. And the fact that the guys that the Cardinals have right now are guys, and we saw it to a tremendous extent in the second game today because Kyle Gibson just didn't have his best stuff. And I even sent out a tweet and said, it kind of feels like Oli Marmol is asking Kyle Gibson to bite off more than he can chew right now, because it just doesn't seem like he's got his stuff today to be able to accomplish what they're looking to get out of him, which was basically, can you get us through 4 or 5 innings? And by some way or another, while allowing 10 hits and walking 2 and giving up a homer, Kyle Gibson only allowed 4 runs in those 4 innings. They all came in inning number 2. It was after the Cardinals hit a couple of solo shots in the first inning. I guess we'll go with game 2 first, and then we'll kind of touch on game 1 because that's just the natural progression of the way that this podcast has gone. Very stream of consciousness tonight. I know some people like it when I'm a little more organized with the pods. Some people like it when I just go because you never know what we're going to say. So this is kind of more of the latter tonight. But the Cardinals with Mason Wynn hitting the home run, first leadoff home run of his career, I believe they said on the broadcast. And then Wilson Contreras hits one into the splash zone in right field just over the wall. Didn't know they had water, didn't know they had fountains. Turned out it's basically like standing rainwater, which is kind of a little bit gross, but I guess that happens. I don't know. Maybe put a plug at the bottom of that little row there so they can drain that out. But anyway, a couple of home runs for the Cardinals in the first, and you're feeling pretty good about life. And I'll be full disclosure, I was at home for game 2. I covered game 1. Cardinals hit a couple of homers. I went into my son's bedroom and we did our bedtime routine. I came out and it was 4-2. I was like, what happened? What's going on, Gibby? And people were freaking out. I put on Twitter, one of my guys that comments on all the YouTubes, and he gets a little bit riled up. You know, we love everybody, but I'm like, dude, they're not going to release Kyle Gibson. All right, let's take a breath. But he didn't have his best stuff tonight. There's no doubt about that. For him to be able to escape the jams that he did in the 3rd and 4th inning just to keep the Cardinals in it was good to see. And when you think about playing a doubleheader, they almost had to do it that way. But a lot of the conversation this morning in Oli Marmol's office was talking about that doubleheader on Wednesday. The idea that fans are going to want you to chase a game that sometimes you cannot, as a manager, chase realistically, because you know what's coming and you know that bill is going to come due at some point. If you are using the JoJo and the Kittredge and the Helsley class of reliever all in the same game and then you don't win that game because you were chasing down 1, he said down 2 or more, it's just evident that you know that there are going to be other guys that you've got to use. It's going to be John King, I mean, 2 scoreless innings tonight, absolutely bailed them out when Gibby was only able to go 4. John King's got a 2.43 ERA, but his role has been, maybe it's 1 inning, maybe it's coming in the middle of an inning, maybe it's multiple innings, but he's going to be in that bridge zone to get to the back end guys, or he's going to have to throw some innings in a game the Cardinals are trailing. That's just for better or worse what his role has been. Matthew Liberatore has been a little bit flexible in that he's been able to be a guy where he'll throw multiple innings if that's what the Cardinals need. And in game 1, when they were up by 8 runs or whatever it was, it needed to be a couple of innings for Matthew Liberatore so they could find a way to preserve as many of their marquee arms for game 2 as possible. Here's an example where, because of the way they managed things in game 1, you get a big lead. They say, Lance Lynn, you're throwing 100 pitches today, bud. Just try to get us through 6, even if you're not on your best game, which I think Lance Lynn pretty well was. 6 innings, 2 runs allowed, had 6 Ks. He pitched pretty good today. Was able to get him through 6, and then it's the Roycroft tier. It's the Liberatore tier to be able to find a way to get through some of that. It's the Kyle Leahy tier. As I correct myself, Libby only threw 1 inning today in game 1. It was Leahy that threw the 2. But that's sort of the bullpen roles that develop. And Leahy was only here as the 27th man. I think he'll be back eventually on more of a full-time basis if things align for that to happen. It's honestly been Giovanni Gallegos has sort of taken over the Leahy role because he's got more veteran experience, and the Cardinals have decided for the time being that they're going to keep him around. And it feels like picking on him a little bit that we're always constantly questioning his spot. But as long as Gio continues to do okay in that role, I think he's going to stick around, and the Cardinals would love nothing more than to find him eventually sharpening up to maybe get back to being a trusted guy and more leverage. But for now, I think they're definitely just going to continue to keep him in the more low leverage roles where, you know what, that means because of your role and what that means for the club, you're going to have to pitch multiple innings sometimes. And Gio has, whether it's, I don't know if he loves it, but that's the role right now. So that's what he's doing. He's pitching multiple innings when the Cardinals ask him to, and that's just been what it is. But the roles of bullpen usage are really important, and they've got 4 guys that basically at a given time, they're probably the guys that are going to come into games when you're down, and then you've got guys that are going to come into the game when you're tied or ahead. And the aggressiveness is going to vary from day to day. But when you had the doubleheader on Wednesday, there were just certain things that were going to be difficult to do to be able to think for the long haul. And I think when you look at the way that today played out, game 2, they were able to empty the clip. Even in a game where Oli Marmol had just got done saying this morning, it's difficult to do when you're down by a run. Are you going to chase the game in the 6th and the 7th and the 8th, and then maybe you're into the 9th? You've used all of your best relievers, but you were down by a run the whole time and your offense never scored again. That's the risk of managing game 2 the way that it was managed, but also the benefit of it is they're able to win the game. Because when the offense and Goldie and Arenado came through with some big moments there in that 8th inning, when you're able to get that from your top guys, which has been what the Cardinals have been waiting to see all season long, and it happening once doesn't mean it's just going to suddenly happen all the time again. But this was, that was an encouraging inning if the Cardinals have ever had one. To get Paul Goldschmidt doubling, and it was just an awesome swing to see from Goldie, and the fact that the ball hops over the wall is a ground rule double, unable to score the run. And then Brendan Donovan darn near hits a 3-run homer. He missed it by about 5 or 6 feet foul down the right field line. But as you're up against it, you're into a pitcher's count, and Arenado comes through with the base hit up the middle, scores 2. The emotion from guys like Arenado and from guys like Paul Goldschmidt crossing the plate with that emotion, yeah, man, this was a big sigh of relief type of moment, I think, for those two in particular, knowing what they mean to this team when things are going. And look, the Cardinals are 5 games above 500. Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado probably in their heart of hearts know that if they don't do their damn jobs, this thing isn't going to go where it's ultimately capable of going. Like, they know that. These guys have been around long enough to know that. And that's got to be a tough thing when you're not performing at the level of your own personal expectation and what the team not only expects of you, but needs, and like what the roster demands of you for this to be a winning club. They know these things. They've been grinding at this, and for them to do that damn job today and come up with that 8th inning the way that they did. Look, it's a moment in time. I'm not going to say, oh, that means the whole thing is fixed and they're both better now. That's not necessarily what it means. You have to string together games and days like this one over and over to be able to then be the player that those guys are, that we're used to seeing from those two. But they both go 2 for 4 in the nightcap, and were a huge part of finding a way to get this win for the Cardinals. And credit to, a lot of people. This conversation that I've been sort of streaming my way through, stream of consciousness, is the notion of bullpen roles, because that was just something that really was intriguing to me from the day. And the other thing was the conversation surrounding Michael Ciani and how Oli Marmol basically said, I love Michael Ciani. Like, I'm a big Michael Ciani fan. And I basically told him in spring, you need to act like this is an opportunity that you can go take it, because there's a chance for you here. There's an opportunity to go be the center fielder. Not many would have predicted it at the beginning of the year. Not many would have thought it possible in spring. And yet Michael Ciani is a fixture on this team. And in game 1, he was hit by a pitch. Cardinals had the massive lead, so he ended up leaving that game. Did come in as a defensive replacement in the 9th inning of game 2, which tells you that hopefully that elbow caught him on the inside of the elbow is okay. The fact that he came in for defense, I think, is a good sign. They probably a little more on the precautionary side when they were up by as many runs as they were in game 1. Just get him off his feet, and then obviously he didn't end up starting in game 2. But came in for defense, which is a good sign. But the fact that Michael Ciani certainly has the backing of the Cardinal manager was something that, seems kind of clear. But to hear him say it in the way that he said it, I thought was pretty emphatic, and it was interesting to hear. But the bullpen stuff was the other part of it, and it's just so interesting because of the way game 1 plays out. Like, these are the little intricacies that get lost sometimes or get missed in understanding the big picture. It's a doubleheader. We're talking about a bullpen that obviously Wednesday you lose both games. Oli Marmol did not empty the clip all the way. He didn't use JoJo in that second game. Didn't chase the game. That didn't feel like the moment to chase it. And in reality, we talked about it on Wednesday night's podcast, how there were things that he did too. Like, he brought in John King, which is the quote-unquote low-leverage guy for that spot. John King threw up some donuts, which gave the Cardinals a little bit more life to be able to come back into it. But then, you do throw Kittredge, and he gives up a run. It's just what it is. They were about as aggressive as they reasonably should have been without being reckless. Like, you're not going to throw Helsley in the 8th inning just to say, oh, I hope we can keep it within 2 or 3. Like, that's just not going to be part of a game plan there. But when game 1 happens against the Cubs on Saturday, and you score 9 runs in the first inning, and Hayden Wisniewski makes 2 errors, and Miles Mastrobuoni throws the ball or bobbles the ball going towards second base, and so it's another fielder's choice that sets up that inning. And then you get the big swing, I think the biggest hit of the day and maybe of the week. And maybe we look back on this hit I'm not going to try to make, well, screw it. I am going to make a lot of it because I think it was a huge moment in the Cardinals season, especially when you look forward to what happened in Game 2, the fact that they were able to win Game 2. In Game 1, Mason Wynn takes a second AB of the inning because he's a leadoff man. He gets a hit. Burley gets a hit. Contreras gets a hit. And then all the fielder's choices and the errors begin. Couple of strikeouts, though, at the bottom of the lineup. Cardinals are up 4-1. You've got ducks on the pond. I think the bases were loaded for Mason Wynn. But now there's 2 outs. And it's like, if Mason Wynn pops out or flies out, and this is basically what Oli Marmol said to me when I asked him about it after Game 1. If he flies out, you're like, okay, the Cubs kind of now feel like they were able to limit the damage somewhat. It's 4-1. Cardinals obviously scored some runs, but the Cubs are at least able to take a little bit of a positive out of it, that they let the first 6 guys on base, and the Cardinals only came up with 4 runs out of that. But Mason Wynn takes a pitch that's low and away. It was a good, well-located pitch, and he golfs it into center field for the hit. I mean, to make contact on that ball, to stay with it, to watch it through the bat head, and to just put a knockout into the outfield grass to score 2 runs. In a 2-strike count, mind you, with 2 outs in the inning. Extends the inning to Alec Burleson, who hits the 3-run homer. The reason that the Wynn hit, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. The reason the Wynn hit is so important is because instead of it being 4-1, he makes it 6-1, and then that allows the inning to continue to the guy that hits the knockout blow. So instead of being 4-1 and you're going, all right, we're in a great spot. Lynn's still going to have to pitch pretty well, though, and then we might have to use our leverage guys in the bullpen. It's 9-1. The script completely changes. Lance Lynn said, I just had to still do the same thing. Keep it simple. Don't walk guys. Don't give them anything. Make them earn it. Attack. All right, that's probably what he's going to do anyway. He threw like 74 fastballs out of 99 pitches. That's fine. He goes 6 innings, 2 runs. It was more than enough, and the Cardinals tacked on a couple of runs later on. They ended up with 11 runs, their most of the season. The 9-run inning was their biggest scoring inning of the season. Because they got those extra 5 runs, the 2 from Wynn's hit and the 3 from Burley's homer, it changed the complexion of the game. It was over. It was a knockout blow after 1 inning. The Cardinals won the game. But to be able to know that, and sometimes maybe that's not true, because when Lance Lynn pitched against the Marlins in a similar circumstance, he gave up 5 or 6 runs instead of just coasting and holding the lead there. It suddenly ended up being a different kind of game. In this case, Lynn did his job, and that meant you're able to go to some of the lesser leveragey kind of guys in your bullpen, which is not to say they're not good pitchers, because the Cardinals, of course, have, I think, a pretty deep bullpen right now. I'm not going to say they're 1 through 8 that you couldn't possibly improve on any of the structure for this team. I still think you're looking trade-wise for one more leverage guy, a right-hander who has some experience at the back end, and I still think John Brebbia makes all the sense in the world from the White Sox, but that's neither here nor there for right now's conversation. Liberatore and Leahy. Leahy's a perfect guy to get for a couple of innings in this game, because as much as I do think he's someone the Cardinals would like to have in their bullpen right now, you don't get 27 men and you don't get 14 guys in your pitching staff on a daily basis unless it's the 27th man in a doubleheader day. And that's what Leahy was today. So functionally, because you're able to use him and use Libby for the final 3 innings of Game 1, and it would have been fun to see a position player pitch, but they didn't go to that route. And Jeff Jones even asked Ollie at the end of the podium session between games, he said, did Crawford want to pitch that 9th inning? And Ollie just basically kind of looked at him and smiled and said, thanks, everybody, and walked away. And then Lance Lynn came in, which was kind of funny. But they are able to use their lower leverage guys, whether you think, I've talked about, I think Liberatore could be a leverage guy for this team at some point, but Leahy certainly is the 27th man. Throw a couple of innings, get through, and you've saved everybody else, and you won a baseball game. That's because of Mason Wynn's ability to go out of the strike zone and golf a 2-strike hit for 2 runs, make it 6-1, and then Burley obviously does the rest with the homer. The game being over after 1 is such a difference compared to having to ride the rail with your leverage guys in Game 1 out of the bullpen to then be able to just guarantee that you win a game, and then you're going into Game 2 going, all right, we need Gibby now for 7 because we used JoJo, Kittredge, and Helsley to lock down Game 1 4-1, 4-3, whatever. Instead, you have all those guys available for game 2. So when Gibby only goes 4, and you could have made the case that he shouldn't have even gone that far, but they got away with it. He got him a double play ball to get out of the inning, was able to, through 97 pitches. He just did not have his best stuff, wasn't consistent in the zone, had a couple of walks, gave up a costly home run in the second inning. But because you were able to kind of save your horses in game 1, John King getting you 2 innings to get you to the back end, it's almost automatic, I think, at that point for Oli Marmol. This is the spot where he chased the game. He did the exact thing that he said this morning. You have to be careful and selective when you're going to do it. Didn't do it on Wednesday. People were mad about that. But you see why. It's just a feel sort of thing. I think he had a great feel for what Wednesday was unfolding to be. And I think he had a great feel for tonight. And look, we're not complimenting him in this way if Goldie and Arenado don't come through with their hits in the 8th inning to be able to get this thing over the hump. But to go Kittredge and then go Romero, and they find a way. And look, Romero was a little shaky, but got the job done. Kittredge was sharp. 2 strikeouts, hitting in a third. ERA's at 3.19. He's been good. I know he's had his moments where it's been a little shaky. Romero's had his moments where it's been a little shaky. Hitting a walk given up by him tonight, but recorded the couple of outs he needed to get through the 8th. 2.43 ERA on the season. And then you let the offense go to work, and you have some trust in those guys to do it. If they don't do it, and you're talking about a 9th inning, like, does Helsley throw the 9th inning if they're down by 1? I wasn't covering the game, so I don't know if that question was asked. I'd be fascinated to know. I'm not saying a right or wrong. I just, those are the tough decisions a manager has to make in that spot, that because the Cardinals scored 2 in the bottom of the 8th, Ollie didn't have to make any decision. He pressed the red button, the Helsley button. Hell's bells, go. And then they get their win. That's a very, very compelling ride-the-rail sort of managerial moment. It very easily could have gone the other way, where you're going, oh, man, they lost the game and they used all 3 of the triumvirate. What's Sunday going to look like? And yeah, what's Sunday going to look like? We're going to see. Miles Michaelis, this might be a spot where they need 6 or 7 from him. But, they would have liked to have gotten that from Gibby in game 2. He didn't have it in him, to the point that people were in the 3rd inning going, they should get Gibby out of this game. And I was thinking, yeah, that'd be a nice luxury to have. Don't know if they have it. But then as the 4th was going, that's when I tweeted. I said, I think he's asking him to bite off more than he can chew. And then he Houdini'd his way out of that jam. But because if there's a take that I give via Twitter in the moment, before the moment's actually over, you can bet I'm going to look silly for it in a couple of minutes. So, again, I wasn't trying to manufacture that. But despite what my Discord might think, I don't have an influence on what happens on the field for the St. Louis Cardinals. When they lose 3 in a row after I make a new Discord channel, new Discord server, everybody was blaming me. I think one more loss, man. If the Cardinals had gotten swept by the Cubs today, I think I'd have had a mutiny on my hands in the Discord. I think everybody would have quit on me. But didn't happen, and we're still growing. I think up over 160 members. So hop on in. The water is very warm, and I'm sure the game day chat will be lively on Sunday afternoon with Michaelis v. Jameson Taillon. But I'm just so fascinated by the minutia of this sort of baseball talk, where you get into the whys and the hows and the what could have beens. And today, the whys and hows is and some of it's obvious. If you win by a bunch and you've got a workhorse on the mound that can get you 100 pitches, whether they're good pitches on that day or not, Lance Lynn was throwing 100 pitches. Well, he threw 99. Same thing. And the fact that he was able to use those 100 pitches to get through 6 innings and then use some low-leverage guys, had the luxury to do so because of the 9-run first inning and Wisniewski throwing the ball all over the place, which helped the Cardinals for sure. That ends up influencing game 2 in a major way, because it gave Ollie the confidence to play with house money a little bit. Say, hey, we got to win today, but we can chase this game a little more because we're only down by 1. Our bullpen has been solid. John King gave us the chance to do it. That's how Ollie's got to be thinking through these moments. And how vindicating is it to say, yep, we're going to do it. We're going to empty the clip. Kittredge, JoJo, they're both in this game. And to get the key hits from guys that have to be your team leaders, have to be your central producers, and haven't been this year in terms of production, and to be that in that moment, in that inning, you literally could not draw it up any better in terms of something that, A, was really great for the team today, but also I think portends what it could look like down the line. I don't want to draw too many conclusions and extrapolate too much and say this means the Cardinals are fixed. I get it. But when you imagine this season at the beginning, it looked kind of like this night game looked. Wilson Contreras walk, Goldie just rifles one down the left field line, ground rule double. If that ball stays in play, it's a game tying hit. But then you didn't get the game tying hit. You need one more. You got to find one more. And Brendan Donovan strikes out. I thought it was going to be him with that swing to the right field corner, just foul. Arenado base hit. That's got to feel good. And then they don't add on from there, but they didn't need to. Helsley was able to get the job done in the ninth inning. He's looking sharp. And I'll be curious to see, does he throw Sunday, and does that preclude him from throwing in the All-Star game? What ends up maybe happening there? It'll be, I tell you what, if you're going to watch the All-Star game on Tuesday and Helsley gets into the game, you're going to be nervous that whole time. You're going to be watching his pitch count because you just know that this could be a time that would be very valuable rest for him. So we'll see. Kind of part of me wonders if Oli doesn't say, hey, you available for a back-to-back if we're up Sunday? And I'm sure he will be, right? Like, because who else is going to be? Granted, all the relievers, anybody that comes in feeling pretty good about his body tomorrow is probably going to tell Skip, yeah, I'm good. I can throw an inning today if you need me to, because they know they're all getting a break. It's just like, be up for the challenge for one more day, and then you get the rest and the recuperation time that you've been seeking. So I'm not going to say it's all hands on deck tomorrow, because everybody in the bullpen today, except for Chris Roycroft, I believe, threw. Liberatore Leahy in Game 1. Game 2, I'm scrolling here, so pardon me for the delay. I thought I was going to pull that off seamlessly. Game 2, King, Kittredge, Romero, Helsley, bing, bing. So maybe there's, Gio. Yeah, Gio didn't throw either because, they won both games. But anyway, I think you're looking for 6 from Miles, and then it's going to be probably Roycroft in the 7th tomorrow, and then you see what the score is, and if you've got a 1-run lead, you find a way to get Kittredge and Romero through the 8th. Like, they'll do it based on matchups, and then Helsley for the 9th. I think that's probably the way that it goes if the Cardinals have to win a close one Sunday. We'll see. And I can't just speak for Helsley to say, oh, yeah, he'll be available for a back-to-back. But I think knowing the circumstances, I think he will be. And I think he'd much rather close out save number 33 tomorrow than say, I need to make sure I'm available for the All-Star game to pitch Tuesday. I don't know. Just my thought. We'll see what ends up happening. But really, really compelling series win today for the Cardinals. And see, the whole podcast has turned into me saying, hey, this little segment, Reporter's Notebook, I want to talk about what Oli said. But it really did blend really nicely into what I wanted to say about the way the bullpen was handled today versus how it was on Wednesday. And it's just a reminder that to not be prisoner of the moment. And I understand it's hard to do. And you guys, Cardinals fans, are so passionate. I understand it 100%. I'm not knocking it. It's just in the moment, you want everything to be a certain way right now. Oli Marmol can't always manage for the right now. And that feels frustrating because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But that's the balance of being a major league manager. And I think that's why I continue to say I think he does a really nice job of it. And today was a great demonstration of that, in my opinion. He was dealt a good hand today, right? He was dealt pocket aces with that 9-run first inning of Game 1. But give Oli Marmol pocket aces, and he's going to find a way to do something with them. That's kind of my belief. If you give him a good situation, I think he's going to show himself to be one of the best managers in Major League Baseball. If you have a situation like last year where the roster is, you're constantly chasing games and you're constantly chasing personnel, and guys aren't, I was going to say cooperating. It's not that they're not being cooperative. It's that they're not performing the roles that they were designed to perform. No manager is going to look great under those circumstances. And so I'm not saying from one doubleheader win, it's Oli Marmol vindication moment, but I just kind of outlined some of this to demonstrate, like, this is why, a day like today is why I do believe that he is a really effective manager. But I just thought it was so interesting the way that he credited the front office before the game in the way that it addressed the bullpen. Because there were times last year where you would ask him about certain guys and, the way things went, and he just kind of look at you. What is he supposed to say about some of the guys they had? They didn't even really know some of those guys that they had to pick up last year. I'm sure they had varying degrees of appreciation for all of them, but you're talking like Andrew Suarez, Jacob Barnes, Casey Lawrence. Like, they just had to get through a grueling August and September, but they went out and they targeted specific guys for specific roles that would then even better highlight the guys that they did have. And then, like, he even used as an example Chris Roycroft. Nobody probably thought back in spring that Roycroft was going to pitch meaningful innings for the Cardinals this year. But then he said we saw him in spring, and, oh, this plays. Like, you see it click, and you say, this guy, hey, work on this, that, and the other, and be ready because that arm's live, and you got to roll. I mean, this is going to come into play. And so they've been able to do such a better job this year with those guys from that bucket. Last year's bucket of guys that was like the 2024 version of Leahy and Roycroft, last year the guys they went to just did not have the juice. And Leahy was among those guys last year who did not have the juice. And when they brought him out at the beginning of this year, I'll be honest, I was skeptical. I was like, the Kyle Leahy that I saw last year, are you sure? It's like that guy on the Conan O'Brien podcast. He said, I'm talking about Jeff Epstein, the New York financier. Anyway, that's a niche reference, but that's how it felt. Like, yeah, same Kyle Leahy. He's turned himself into somebody a lot more viable than he was last year. The front office plus the guys that maybe they placed some bets on a year ago, like a Leahy, which I don't think he was like first in line last year, but got a spot where it just didn't go well for him, but has now become more viable. And I think a lot of people deserve credit for making that the way that it's gone. Again, Ryan Fernandez, like this thing doesn't go without Ryan Fernandez this year, and he was a Rule 5 pickup. They very much wish they had Keenan Middleton. I think they need to trade for their Keenan Middleton, whether it's John Brebbia or somebody like him. That's really what the final iteration is here. And sure, you can make the case that, well, they didn't have Giovanni Gallegos, the version of him that they're used to having. But I think they kind of sensed last year that Giovanni Gallegos wasn't going to be that guy this year. So they knew they had to go out and get maybe one extra legit leverage guy. And they started the season trying Gio in that same role, and it obviously flamed out. But, they may have had some inkling that was going to be that way at the beginning of the year, and they prepared for it. So I do think where sometimes we mercilessly rip John Mozeliak for certain things that he does not do, I think he did a very good job of addressing the bullpen, and now I just think he needs to do the cherry on the top. He needs to go get one more to turn a really good bullpen unit into one that is even easier for Oli Marmol to maneuver on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, and then turn it into an even better unit. It could be a great unit and a great October unit. I mean, you could picture 1 through 8 in that bullpen being pretty lethal by the time October comes, if the Cardinals can get there and if health, provides for that group. If you add one more really trusty 7th, 8th inning type of guy, I think it could sing. I think that bullpen could really sing. So I've rambled. I always do. That's kind of the name of the game here on B-Schaeff Daily. But I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast right about here. There are definitely things that I intended to get to that I didn't get to. One of them is actually something that's very down on the farm related. So I am going to go ahead and play the drop, and I'll explain my quick down on the farm for the day. It's time to go down on the farm. So the one minor league thing I'll bring up today is Quinn Matthews pitching in the Futures game. They're in Arlington, Texas. The uniform's goofy as hell, but that's not Quinn Matthews' fault. He had an inning pitched, struck out a couple of batters, did not allow a run, didn't walk anybody, allowed one hit. Look out for Quinn Matthews. As we talk about trade deadline stuff, Quinn Matthews, the lanky left-hander, is one name that I just don't see the Cardinals trading, even though he's sort of in that caliber of guy that other teams are probably going to be interested in. I would be really shocked to see the Cardinals move him. He has been a fast riser in the organization. And I'm not just saying this because of a couple of strikeouts in a scoreless inning in the Futures game, but they drafted him in the 4th round last year, and almost immediately you go, okay, this guy threw 156 pitches in a game for Stanford last year, durable arm. He's 23, going on 24, so older. Like, he was a 4-year collegiate pitcher. So that's why a guy like that drops maybe lower than the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round. He's a 4th rounder. Obviously, there's some intrigue there. Even his ERA, 3.75 senior season ERA, but was a workhorse. 124 innings. Like, if you're the Cardinals and you're looking at, who's somebody that could impact us within the next 2-3 years, like quick, maybe even next 2 years, who could that be? I think Quinn Matthews was a hell of a pick in the 4th round, and I liked it when they did it. But I like it even more now. 158 strikeouts in 124 innings in his senior season at Stanford, and just wanted to be a workhorse, didn't care Yeah, blow out my arm, whatever. We're trying to win a College World Series. Like, that's the kind of personality and bulldog you want on the mound, and then it's up to the team to maybe try to tamp that down a little bit and make sure you protect the guy from himself sometimes. But I think he is going to be a really interesting guy to track next spring training. I don't think we'll see him this year. Like, I'm not trying to get too carried away, but he went and started out in low A Palm Beach, which I get why the Cardinals did that, because he threw so many innings at Stanford last year that they just said, we'll give him the rest of the year off in terms of organized innings. He's not going to pitch for any of the affiliates. He goes to Palm Beach to begin the year. He starts 6 games with a 1.47 ERA. 30 innings, which, like, to throw 5 innings per start at Palm Beach, where usually they're so careful with guys' arms, it was kind of impressive. 52 strikeouts in 30 innings. Okay, bump him up to Peoria. That's high A. 2.68 ERA in 7 starts, 43 innings. So he's averaging more than 6 innings per start at high A, and he struck out 58 and 43 and 2/3. Okay, bump him up. Double A, he's got 2.5 ERA now in the first couple of starts he's had there. Allowed a few unearned runs, so his total run average allowed is like 4.2, but 2.53 on the earned run average in 10 innings, and he's got 10 strikeouts. And then, obviously, the Futures game performance. So, very intrigued to see what Quinn Matthews can continue to do at Double A Springfield. Like I said, I'm not saying you're going to see him this year, but he's going to turn 24 in October, and I think he's seasoned in maybe I think you could see him in 2025 for sure if his trajectory continues. That doesn't mean I think you should be predicting him to start in the rotation next year. Like, be reasonable with expectations for young players, and the habit to want to rush them along is something that can kind of get you in trouble sometimes. You being the Cardinals, you being, me, fans that would look at it and say, hey, I want to see this guy right now. The Cardinals do have to have some prudence with that at times and make sure they're not putting guys in bad positions. But I think Quinn Matthews is going to be the type that can continue to rise quickly if the performance continues to dictate, and obviously if health holds. That's always going to be a thing for any pitcher. But good to see him, have a little success on that national stage with the Futures game appearance earlier on Saturday. And I think if he continues to thrive at Double A, I don't know if they would bump him up to a 4th level in 1 year at Triple A, or if they would maybe start him at Triple A next year. Certainly seems to be likely, which is another reason when we're talking about trades, you look at that Double A rotation, and hopefully health-wise, Tink Hens ends up coming through okay. We have not seen him pitch in a game for Springfield since June 23rd. Remember, he left the game on June the 5th with a cramping issue, and then we talked to him down in Birmingham at Rickwood Field, and he said, just cramping. I'm supposed to be back into the swing of things and taking my start here before too long. And then June 23rd happened, and he left that start early. So we're kind of wait and see mode. I have not heard anything really substantive about him and his health status. But assuming he can get back on the track, he's a guy that by next year you'd think maybe AAA. Cooper Jerpy certainly could be on that trajectory to get to AAA. I think Quinn Matthews definitely could be. Again, we're projecting a little bit, but that's kind of what you have to do with prospects. So if even 2 of those 3 are ready to be in the day 1 AAA rotation next year, there's a clog beginning to form that the Cardinals are going to have to make some decisions about. And I think this deadline could honestly be a perfect time. I'm not saying those guys are necessarily ready yet to advance to AAA, so they do have to be a little bit careful about what that looks like. But they could make some moves, and guys like Zach Thompson could end up being on the block. I don't know that to be sure, but it would be interesting. Would you trade Zach Thompson for a rental of John Brebbia? Potentially. I'm not saying I'm just going to guarantee press the button, but I could understand the Cardinals making that kind of move where they say, look, as much as we want Zach Thompson to work out, he was a first-round pick, and we really want to prioritize, could they end up making a really tough business decision of, hey, we might have to clear some spots in that AAA rotation, and if that's where Zach right now is stashed and we don't see a spot for him in the bigs, and we could use the role of what this reliever that we could acquire for him could bring us, and then you could see the benefit of a team like the White Sox just say, if they trade Fetty or Crochet or both, which maybe the Cardinals want one of those guys, it's going to cost more to get them than it would a Brebbia per se, then maybe they could say Zach Thompson in their rotation. You could see the benefit to them as well. I'm not saying just straight up that's something I would or wouldn't do, because I understand years of control, and that Zach Thompson, if he figures it out, is a guy that you want to have around for a long, long time. But those are the kinds of tough, fork in the road, rubber meets the road type of trade discussions and concepts that I think the Cardinals are going to have to think about and consider where they stand on when it comes to certain guys. But just something to think about as Quinn Matthews, I think, is going to be a guy that can continue to rise quickly if things keep going well for him. But that's my down on the farm. I don't really have anything else. Tommy Edman was not in the lineup for Double-A Springfield. Take that for whatever you want to. I think he's only really been DHing so far, which to me is at least I was DEFCON 1.5, right? I would say the DEFCON rating goes a little bit more to the favorable side now that he's played some games. But is it maybe still like a DEFCON 2 because you're almost waiting for the other shoe to drop until you see him in the field and play some center and play some short? I think they're still very much taking it slow with him. And as I'm looking at the box score, was not in the lineup on Saturday for Springfield. They did win 10-2, though. Brandon Komar, who was a pitcher for AAA, a reliever for them, they sent him down to Springfield as he had some rougher numbers in AAA. But maybe kind of like a Palante move. I don't happen to know much about this, but just kind of reading some tea leaves, where they sent him down from the big leagues down to AAA to be a starter. Or really, they sent him down for performance basis, but then they said, hey, you want to start? Komar was sent down. He had 6 innings of one-hit baseball today with 5 Ks for Double-A. He is 25 years old, though, so I'm not so sure about prospect status, but wasn't starting and now is, and had a nice one today for Springfield. So I don't know any more about that than you do, but just kind of interesting to note, and nothing to report from Edmond, and really no big-name performances from guys in Memphis offensively. So I'm going to wrap the podcast here for real this time. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, for supporting, for subscribing, for considering jumping on board for a channel membership, for supporting the live streams like you guys do, lots of super chats and stuff like that. You guys have been a fantastic audience, and I know you'll continue to be because you guys are great. So thank you so much for the support. We'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.